Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, or night. It really depends on where you are, I guess. Today, I thought that I would film a video about how I prepared for an unmedicated birth following my first labor being highly medicated. And what I mean by medicated is the use of pain medication. A disclaimer before this video, as all my birth videos, if you choose to have pain medication or an epidural or whatever your birth story is, this story isn't intended to make one way of birthing feel superior to another. This is just my own experience with my body, with chronic pelvic pain and chronic pain in general, and what was right for me. Birthing is such an individualized process, so please don't feel in any way that me sharing my story is saying that if you choose to have a C-section that is inferior in some way, or if you have an epidural that's inferior in some way. For those of you that follow me on social media or know a little bit about my birth history, with my first daughter, my firstborn, my daughter Ivy, it was a long labor, but I ended up having an epidural probably about 5 centimeters, and it really slowed my labor personally. And I feel my postpartum recovery was substantially longer than it maybe should have been. Being a pelvic health physiotherapist, I see women that have epidurals and women that don't, and at least from a clinical standpoint, I see the women that are able to birth unmedicated with minimum intervention tend to rebound a lot quicker. So for the birth of my son Clark, I really wanted to explore whether or not an unmedicated birth may be a possibility for me. Being someone that has struggled with persistent pain pretty much my entire life, from when I was even a child, my sister told me she remembers me complaining about back pain even when I was maybe, I'm gonna say 6 or 7. So it's been a long road for me. That's a topic for another day. For someone that has dealt with chronic pain for a really long time, the idea of having a medicated birth was really scary for me at first. And I think that's kind of the hallmark of, if you're considering an unmedicated birth, but you feel like it's not a possibility for you, the first thing that I would really recommend is starting to explore your beliefs around birth and really dive into that fear surrounding birth, where it comes from. Educating yourself about the physiology of birth, at least for me, was really, really helpful. So where did I start? Well, I pretty much prepped for my birth my entire pregnancy in some way, shape, or form. Because of my first birth experience, I found myself in my first trimester becoming extremely anxious for a variety of reasons, and the anxiety was becoming really uncontrollable for me. And I mentioned it to my midwife and said, I think that this might be something that we might want to address treating. And we did a series of questionnaires that screen women for generalized anxiety disorder, depression, and I was scoring pretty high on them. So she reached out to a counselor in my community, and I was very fortunate, able to get in with her. So I started to really dive into my feelings surrounding my first birth, as well as some other things in my life that hadn't really been addressed recently in counseling. I've done about 10 years of counseling altogether, but I hadn't been in counseling in a while, so it was probably time to go back. So I started with counseling. Again, that's not everybody's journey. It's a really vulnerable thing to put yourself in counseling, and I understand that on a variety of different levels. Even being a healthcare practitioner and letting some of my colleagues know that, you know, I'm in counseling, there's still a lot of stigma, or maybe it's self-projected stigma even, about being in counseling and what people are going to perceive you as, that you're unhinged or you're crazy, which is not the case. Life is hard for a lot of us. I would say all of us. And I think that getting in with good mental health support, if you feel you need it, can really be helpful. So for me, I did about 8 months of counseling throughout my pregnancy to really unpack my previous birth experience and prep for my birth with Clark. About 3 months before my due date, I signed up for a class that's called Hypnobirthing. I'll put some links down below if you're interested in hypnobirthing. I'm full disclaimer here, I was very skeptical. I like to say I'm a very open person. I am extremely open, but I was still a little skeptical about the hypnobirthing. I think hypnosis gets kind of a bad rap in the medical community in general, or even community at large. So I'm like, oh, what's this hypnobirthing? Is it going to be helpful? Honestly, hands down, would recommend this to anybody about to have a birth. Even if it's a planned C-section, to be honest, if you have any anxieties around being a parent after your birth experience, or you really want to learn how to take ownership of your body and ownership of your birth experience, hypnobirthing is fantastic. It teaches you really about the physiology of birth, which I really don't feel is educated well in our community of women. Often on TV, birth is depicted at this really wild, crazy thing, and there's a lot of fear surrounding birth, and we see that from a very young age. Like, I had never seen a birthing woman in the flesh until I had my own baby. So it's really mysterious for a lot of us, myself included. And even though I'm a pelvic physiotherapist, I really didn't know what birth looked like until I had my baby. And I realized a lot of my beliefs surrounding birth were not the healthiest. I thought it was supposed to be extremely painful, that babies got stuck a lot and intervention was common. And hypnobirthing really challenged that gently through guided meditations that I would listen to before I went to bed. A lot of the times I would fall asleep. What hypnobirthing is it teaches you about what the birthing physiology process is. And essentially, the best way I can describe birthing without going in depth is the same mindset that it is easy to be in to achieve an orgasm, or if you're having a really amazing lovemaking session. That is the physiological space we need to be in to have a really successful labor. And if you imagine most women birth in a hospital, what do we associate hospitals with? Often illness, often sickness. It's not really conducive to the physiological processes that need to be in place for labor to advance. A lot of women already know the hormone oxytocin is the primary hormone to drive contractions. That's the same hormone that's released when you have an orgasm. That's the same hormone that's released when you have a letdown of milk. So if you can feel loved, if you can feel safe and secured, you're more likely to have a labor that progresses well, and you're a lot more likely to be able to manage the surges and the intensity that comes along with having a baby. And you'll notice that I'm not saying the pain, because whoever's watching this might think I'm a little bit crazy town when I say this. My birth of Clark wasn't painful. It was the most intense experience of my life. It was definitely uncomfortable. I was definitely very vocal. there were times that I would break my concentration and want an epidural out of pure exhaustion, but it was never painful. I know that might be hard to believe, but it wasn't. It was the most beautiful, intense, emotional experience of my life, exhausting experience, but it was not painful. So hypnobirthing gives you a bunch of scripts. What I did was I had my hypnobirthing scripts and I actually recorded myself saying the scripts and listened to it myself. Now, if you don't like your own voice, you might want maybe your partner to record the scripts. I know that there's some applications out there that have hypnobirthing scripts, but the important thing is with hypnobirthing is practice, practice, practice. I say to my clients that it's similar to a marathon runner preparing for a race or a high-level athlete preparing for their game. You visualize the play over and over and over again. So every night before bed, I would put on my hypnobirthing script, whatever one I was in the mood for. I had about 4 that I was using, and I would listen to that and visualize my birth, exactly how I wanted it to go. Which, if you watch my birthing video, I wanted a home birth, but we had other plans. But because, we had other plans, he had other plans. But because I had done all that practice and I had practiced visualizing a hospital birth and also a C-section, I was psychologically prepared to go in. So hypnobirthing, yes, that was a long rant about hypnobirthing. Number 3 was building an awesome birth team. Now, depending on where you live in the world, this may be easier or not. It was easier for me potentially than other women because I am a birth practitioner. So I know how to navigate the system. And with my clients, I really help them navigate the system if they're unsure. So I had my midwife from my previous birth, and I actually ended up having 3 midwives. What, Bum? I'm doing a video. You want to say hi? Here. Wave. Say hello.
Hello.
Say, my name's Aggie.
My name is Aggie.
So I built an amazing birth team of my midwife. I had one of my friends who's a chiropractor and acupuncturist. I had a doula who, because of COVID-19, was unable to attend my birth, but she was really helpful before. I had a postpartum doula in case I needed it. I ended up not using the postpartum doula because of COVID-19. My husband was home. We felt we couldn't use her. Actually, I probably would have used her if it wasn't for COVID. I had a pelvic floor physiotherapist. Yes, pelvic floor physiotherapists need pelvic floor physio. Who else did I have? My massage therapist. I felt like I had an appointment every week. For me, I'm a planner, so I felt if I could keep my body in as great condition as I could, my mind is in great condition as I can, I was more likely to have a successful birth experience. Birth is a wild ride and we can't predict everything, but I wanted to put as many eggs in my basket as I could. So the question of whether or not to have an OBGYN or a midwife is a really big question and beyond the scope of this video. I chose midwifery because I was a low risk pregnancy. My first pregnancy was fine. My first birth was fine. No complications there. And I didn't wish to have a C-section. There was a point that I wanted to consult with an OB-GYN in case I needed a C-section, but we didn't end up doing that. I think it was just a little bit too much of me wanting to overplan things, so I didn't end up doing that. So build a really good birth team, including your birth support. I think a lot of the times we think that we need a midwife, but I always say to my clients and myself is who's supporting you during labor. I hope you found this helpful. Because YouTubers say this, I'm going to say this too. If you like my videos, subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram. My handle is Pelvic Physio Mom, and I'm hoping to put out more content like this in the future. I'm really hoping to put out some early postpartum exercise videos because I really don't see that out there, and I would really like to create that content because there's amazing fitness professionals on YouTube and on the internet, but I'm really not seeing a lot of that really early postpartum work that can really maybe help some women not get injured. So take care and look for some more videos in the future.